The businessman had been searching for his former lover for a long time when suddenly someone called him and informed him that they had found his ex-girlfriend, Joyce. Coincidentally, Joyce had applied for a job at the new restaurant he was setting up. Would he ever find out that they had children together? He decided to pretend to be someone else to get closer to her and her children. Would his plan work? "Boss, we found the person you've been looking for," his assistant informed him. "Can you believe it? She's in the same area where you're opening a new branch of your restaurant." Dave learned that Joyce had applied for a job there. He altered his appearance slightly so that Joyce wouldn't recognize him. He didn't want to startle her, fearing she might take their possible children away from him. Joyce, on the other hand, thought her new boss was just a kind man. He often visited the twins, who were frequently left unattended, forcing Joyce to bring them to work. Dave didn't mind. Even though 2 years had passed, he had never forgotten his first love, Joyce. She remained etched in his memory, a joy that nothing else could surpass. "One day, I will hold your hands again, Joyce," Dave whispered while looking at her photo. He kept a copy of it because he didn't want to forget her face. "I've longed to see you for so long. Now I can finally see you again. You will always be my love. It will never fade away." Moments later, his phone buzzed with a message. He immediately checked it and read, "Mr. Terry's, we've traced Joyce's location. She's near your area." Upon reading this, his heart pounded. He had hired a private investigator to find Joyce because he wanted to make amends and have her back in his life. His love for her had never faded, even though they had faced unexpected problems in the past. Now, as a successful man, he was determined to do everything to bring Joyce back. He had the means to do so, being a chairman with plenty of money. His private investigator sent another message. "She has twins who are now 2 years old, chubby, beautiful, and I think they resemble you. We just need confirmation if they are indeed your children." Dave felt nervous upon reading this. He couldn't reply as his mind raced with questions. Did Joyce have children? Was she married? He wondered. The investigator then sent photos, and when Dave saw them, he was astonished. His blood rushed, and he couldn't hold back his tears. This was wonderful news that he needed to share with his mother, who had been longing for a grandchild. Among all his siblings, Dave was the only one who hadn't given her a grandchild, which had left her disappointed. However, there was a problem. He couldn't immediately introduce Joyce and the children to his mother. It might take time because he only wanted to present Joyce and their children to her. There were many women out there, but Dave felt nothing for any of them, not even a hint of joy. He typed a reply, "Thank you for finding my children. You'll receive a bonus. Please provide me with all the information you've gathered, and I'll take care of the next steps." The private investigator thanked him. Dave's entire day was filled with happiness. He had been searching for Joyce for so long. She was the only woman who had given him true happiness, something he had never felt before. He could never replace her with anyone else. Joyce was unique. "Joyce, I hope you can forgive me someday," Dave whispered while talking to her photo. He smiled all day, and every employee he encountered noticed his good mood. They were surprised because he was rarely in such a cheerful state. They whispered among themselves, wondering if he had won the lottery. Dave went to a coffee shop, and while ordering coffee, his phone buzzed again. He received a text from his secretary. "A new applicant has applied for the waiter position at your restaurant." Dave's restaurant. Dave's restaurant was a high-end establishment that had received awards from both local and international entities. It had been a year since he opened the restaurant, and he had become more skilled in managing it. His success was also driven by his desire to provide for Joyce and their family. He replied, "Schedule the interview for Monday so the applicant can prepare." After sending the message, he put his phone back in his pocket and returned to his office, still smiling. As he sipped his coffee, he signed some documents while waiting for the applicant's file to download. Moments later, he was shocked by what he read on the resume. Joyce was the new applicant at his restaurant. He stared at the screen, overwhelmed. His hands trembled. He wondered why she had applied. Hadn't she been successful in her own business when they were together? This thought troubled him. But was this the opportunity he had been waiting for? Was this the sign he had been seeking? Was this the right timing? As he read her resume, Dave thought of a way to expedite his plan. Joyce was in the same area as him. The world truly was round, and his hope of reuniting with Joyce grew stronger. He believed that fate had brought them together in one place. All the prayers he had made every night were coming true. In his joy, he gave bonuses to various employees and called his friends to celebrate that evening. It was only right to celebrate the good things happening to him. First, he had discovered that the twins might be his children. Second, Joyce had applied to his restaurant. These two events were worth celebrating. "Wait for me, Joyce," he said as he stared at her file again. Joyce had been through a lot, but despite her struggles, she had never given up on her dream of becoming a wealthy woman. She had done everything she could, but she had lost hope of achieving a prosperous life. However, she didn't stop trying, especially since she had twins. Yes, she was a single mother because Dave had left her, and she had children because of him. She couldn't do what she needed to do because of her children, but she truly loved them. There was nothing she could do now. They were here. Her only thought was to raise and love them, and to hide them from Dave. She thought that Dave had no right to the children because he had abandoned her. He hadn't even checked on her, not even a text or call since the day he went abroad. She was angry at Dave, so angry that she felt buried in the past. However, the past few days had not been easy for her. She made efforts, but she hadn't been accepted for any of the jobs she applied for. 10 in total. She was slowly losing hope. If only her business hadn't gone bankrupt, she would have been successful by now. If only I could start over, she thought to herself as she tidied her daughter's beds. She tried to hold back her tears, but every night, as she watched her children, she thought about her problems and cried. It was painful to think about and hard to accept, but there was nothing she could do. This was her fate. She hoped that one day, she would rise again. Joyce knew she couldn't give up. If she gave up, she would be making her children's lives miserable, and she wouldn't do that to them. One day, the things she prayed for would come true. She believed that God would not abandon her. One day, she would be one of the millionaire women that people admired. One day, she would achieve prosperity. If only I could start over, she thought again. But she had no capital for her business, especially since she was drowning in debt. She had no parents to turn to. They were already in heaven. So, she kept her problems to herself. Tears streamed down her face. How will I get through this? I still don't have a job. I only have 10,000 pesos left, which isn't enough for the three of us in the coming days. Lord, please grant me relief in life, Joyce prayed as she cried. Fortunately, her children were in the living room and didn't understand what was happening. She didn't want to cry in front of them. She didn't want them to see her struggling. After fixing the beds, she took her phone from the small table, hoping to see some good news in her email from the past 2 days. She had applied to 5 restaurants as a waitress. Please, let there be good news, she whispered as she held her phone, closing her eyes and praying that at least one job would come through. When she opened her email, she scrolled with sadness and anxiety in her heart. "Oh my God," Joyce whispered, covering her mouth as tears flowed. "Thank you, Lord," she said, her heart pounding with joy. Her spirits lifted, and her sadness disappeared. The CEO had accepted her application, and she needed to go to the restaurant for an interview on Monday. Mixed emotions filled her. Joyce was happy, but she told herself she would do everything to secure the job at the restaurant she had applied to. It was the first time someone had called her. She wouldn't waste this opportunity. "This is it, Joyce. Do everything for your children and their future," she said, filled with hope. She left the room and went to the living room, embracing her children tightly. She just wanted to hug them because of the joy in her heart. "This is for you," she said, sure that her children felt the joy she was feeling because they hugged her back. She cried again, but her emotions subsided. She sat down to search for information about Dave's restaurant. At first, she hesitated to apply because the restaurant shared the name of her ex-boyfriend, but it was the one that gave her good news today. Dave couldn't contain himself. Early in the morning, he dressed up, wore a suit and styled his hair. He couldn't settle down, even though he wouldn't admit it. He was nervous about seeing Joyce again. If it weren't for this situation, he would have regretted it. He needed to disguise himself a bit so Joyce wouldn't recognize him. He planned not to startle her immediately because he knew she might distance herself from him if she found out. For now, he didn't want to reveal everything. Joyce only knew him as her boss, not as her ex-boyfriend, Dave. But even so, Dave made an effort because, from now on, he would reclaim Joyce. He also needed confirmation if the twins were indeed his children. He faced the large mirror, looking at his reflection. Even though he couldn't tell Joyce his true intentions, he would take many steps to reveal his love for her at the right time. "I will always love you, Joyce. That will never change," he said to himself. It was Monday, and his employees were busy with their tasks, so they wouldn't notice the change in his attire. He usually didn't wear formal clothes, opting for simplicity, but today, since Joyce was the applicant, he needed to present himself differently. He wore a blue suit, his favorite, remembering their first date. It was a simple and plain date, but he would never forget Joyce's first kiss on his lips. He missed her lips. After ensuring he looked perfect, he took the documents and his phone and went to the living room, where he found his younger brother rummaging through a bag. "You're back," Dave greeted him. "I thought you didn't come home anymore. I have my own house now. I bought it last month, and I'll be staying there," his brother Jade informed him. Dave was used to his brother's snarky attitude, so as the older brother, he often teased Jade when he acted like this. "Good morning, my dear brother," Dave said in a mocking tone. "That's good. You're independent now. That's great," he joked, noticing Jade's furrowed brow. Just as Jade was about to leave, he spoke again. "I saw Joyce yesterday." Dave's brother paused, wanting to continue. "Please go on," Dave urged. "She had twins, and the children look like you. Did you get her pregnant before you left?" Jade teased. Dave didn't know whether to be happy or not about what Jade said. Since the day Jade and Joyce met, Jade had always been rude to Joyce. He didn't know why his brother acted that way, but Joyce understood Jade. "I already knew about it," Dave replied. "Well, that's sad. I don't feel like she needs you," Jade said in a challenging tone. "Don't disturb them, brother. I think they're happy now," he added, joking but with a hint of seriousness. Dave was left speechless by Jade's words. He wanted to defend himself, but Jade quickly went upstairs, leaving Dave feeling like he was floating in a dark place. Although he had heard what Jade said, he took a deep breath. He shouldn't let it affect him. Only he knew his reasons for leaving Joyce. Even though he had promised never to leave her, he had to. Joyce knew it too. He wanted to have daughters or sons, but he wasn't responsible back then, and now he was chasing after Joyce. He hoped Joyce wasn't married and that he was the twins' real father. But it seemed like Joyce was hiding something. It was as if she didn't want anyone to know about her life. He was intrigued and wanted to face the uncertain situation. He felt that Joyce wasn't happy with her current life. "Joyce, you will be mine again, no matter what stands in my way. Even if you're married, even if you have children, I will do everything to have you back," Dave whispered to himself. He snapped out of his thoughts, left the house, and drove to Dave's restaurant. Meanwhile, Joyce couldn't contain her joy. Today was the day of her interview at Dave's restaurant. She had prayed all night that this job would be the one to lift her out of poverty. After preparing herself, she went to the restaurant with her 2 adorable children. She had no one to leave them with, so she brought them along. It was just an interview. Not her first, but this time, she felt a nervousness she couldn't explain. It was as if something was waiting for her attention. She made herself look beautiful and plain, which made her more pleasant in her interviews. She couldn't afford fancy clothes, but as long as she looked presentable, it was fine. She didn't neglect herself. It took her an hour to reach the restaurant, and as she stood in front of it, her nervousness intensified. She wasn't usually a nervous person. "You can do this, Joyce," she encouraged herself and entered the restaurant. She looked around, and as expected, Dave's restaurant was beautiful. A high-end establishment with many customers and a reputation throughout the Philippines and abroad. According to her research, the restaurant had opened 10 branches across the Philippines in just 6 months, and the branch in their area had just opened last month. She led her 2 children, convincing herself that she hoped they would be allowed inside since there was no one to watch them. They would behave. Moments later, a man approached her, startling her with his sudden appearance. "Are you Joyce Marasigan?" he asked. She bowed respectfully, as he seemed to hold a high position based on his attire. "Yes, I'm Joyce Marasigan. I'd like to ask where the owner's office is for the interview." "I'm an applicant," she said in a soft voice. She didn't know why, but there was something about him that she couldn't quite understand. She stared at him. He seemed familiar, but she couldn't quite place him. He was wearing transition glasses, so she couldn't see his eyes clearly, and he was also wearing a mask. She wondered why he was wearing a mask. Was the COVID-19 pandemic still ongoing? She felt nervous. The man smiled at her but looked away, and she didn't know what to make of it. There was confusion in her mind. Was he someone she knew, or did he just resemble someone she knew? They were talking when suddenly, one of her children called out, "Mommy!" She immediately turned to her child. "Excuse me," she said to the man, who just nodded and smiled at her. "Yes, sweetheart?" she asked her daughter Eileen, who had turned to her. "I want milk," the child requested. Joyce sighed. Was this what she had been worried about? Fortunately, she had brought milk. She took the milk from her bag and gave it to her child. She was concerned that the interviewer might get angry, but she saw the man's surprised expression and decided not to dwell on it. He might just be annoyed that she brought her children to the interview. She turned back to the man, took a deep breath and apologized. "I'm sorry. I had to bring them because there's no one to take care of them. I'm a single mom, you know," she explained. She saw the man staring at her and her children as if he might kidnap them, so she held their hands tightly. She could still see his eyes through the transition lenses. "It's all right. Come, follow me," the man said, and she followed him, pulling her children along. She thought he must hold a high position at the restaurant, or perhaps he was the owner. He treated her well, even though she had brought her children to the interview. Dave was ready for it. He knew Joyce would hide the truth about the twins, but he was lucky. He had confirmation that they were his children. He was also fortunate to see that she had brought the children to the interview room. Once inside the office, he prepared himself. Truthfully, he felt sorry for Joyce's situation. He could sense her desperation to be hired. It seemed like this was her last card. Dave observed the twins. His private investigator was right. They did resemble him. When he asked if she was ready for the interview, Joyce was surprised. She hadn't expected him to be the owner of the restaurant. He wore transition glasses that would tint with even a little sunlight and a mask. "I'm the owner of Dave's restaurant," he informed her, trying not to laugh at her reaction. "Don't be nervous. Take it easy," Dave said gently, even though he was also nervous. This was their reunion after years of separation. But Joyce didn't work. Dave had already planned to hire her even before the interview. She was already hired. Joyce approached him. "I'm sorry. I didn't recognize you right away. You're the owner of the restaurant." "I'm really sorry," she said, sitting down on the swivel chair. "It's okay. Bring them here," Dave said, apologizing for the twins potentially disrupting the interview. "Actually, I've already made a decision. Your track record and other files are good, and based on your resume, your credentials are fine. So, even without the interview, it's okay. You're officially hired," Dave said. Even Dave couldn't admit that he was biased in his decision. He was surprised when Joyce faced him, seemingly on the verge of tears. Dave stood up and approached her. "Thank you so much, sir. It means a lot to me. I'm sorry if my interview was a fail, but you still accepted me," Joyce said, smiling. Dave smiled back, thinking, "For you, Joyce, for our children." A week had passed, and Joyce's performance at the restaurant was excellent. Every day, Dave wanted to see her. He was in a good mood whenever he saw Joyce, especially her gentle face, which seemed to touch his heart. If he could, he would claim her immediately, but that wasn't possible. He had to follow the plan. He couldn't startle Joyce, fearing that if she found out he was her ex-boyfriend, she would distance herself and take the children away from him. From his desk, His phone buzzed with a text message from his private investigator. Confirmed, boss. The twins are indeed your children. Upon reading this, Dave's joy knew no bounds. He had been waiting for this result for days. He had obtained hair samples from the twins. He was lucky because Joyce allowed him to bring the children to work. In fact, the children often stayed in his office, or more accurately, their office. He didn't deny that within a week, he had quickly bonded with the children. Annalisa, he called one of the children, who was holding a Barbie doll he had bought. He had also bought their clothes. Joyce knew this because he had explained that it was for her good performance at the restaurant. But the truth was, he really wanted to spoil the children. Annalisa approached him, and so did Eileen, even though he hadn't called her. "Do you think your mom will like the dress I'm giving her?" he asked. After saying this, he showed them the dress he had bought from an expensive brand. "Mommy will like it so much," Eileen said. Dave smiled. His children were lively, but for now he couldn't call them his children. He had to restrain himself. When Joyce came to take the children, Dave noticed the fatigue on her face. "I've already fed them, Joyce," he said, and her eyes widened. He was happy with what he was doing for his daughters, but something felt off. "Boss, I don't know how to repay your kindness," Joyce said in a surprised voice. She approached her children. "You've already given me so much help," she added. "Enough of that, Joyce. I'm happy to help you," Dave defended himself. "And besides, I don't have anything else to focus on." "I love your daughters," he said. Even Dave was surprised by what he had said. It was the truth, but he shouldn't have said it. Joyce was stunned by his words. Dave cursed himself in his mind. He couldn't control himself. As Joyce left, he called her back. She finished taking the foreigner's orders before going to the boss's office. What does he need now? She wondered to herself. In the past few days, Dave's treatment of her had been different. She really wondered why. It wasn't right because she was just an employee, and there was a vast gap between them. She was curious why Dave called her to his office every day. If she thought about it, she was luckier than other workers. But she felt it was wrong because she was receiving special treatment from the owner of Dave's restaurant. She couldn't deny that she was starting to admire the man, and she had to stop herself from falling for him. But she didn't show it to her boss. Perhaps it was enough that he called her every day, watched her children, and drove her home every night. All of that required effort, and she didn't let it go unnoticed. But all of that was uncertain because perhaps Dave just pitied her, which he shouldn't have done. Who wouldn't fall for Dave? He was so kind, a gentleman, and, above all, treated her children well. His wealth and success were just bonuses. He gave her everything she needed almost immediately, but she didn't take advantage of it. Sometimes she even refused, but Dave was insistent. "It's okay, Joyce. Don't worry about it. It's just a bonus for your good work," Dave said sweetly to her. She didn't know if there was another meaning or implication behind everything he did, but it was impossible for her not to fall for him. In the past few days, he had been texting her often, asking about her day, her work, and her children. The questions were often personal, but Joyce couldn't do anything about it because she didn't want to dismiss the woman. But it seemed like Dave was showing her something different. She entered his office and found her children eating ice cream. Joyce smiled. Dave really knew what her children's favorite foods or desserts were. She looked around as Dave came out of the bathroom and saw him looking directly at her. "Joyce, you're here," he greeted her. "Good morning," she replied. "Why did you call me?" "Please stop the thing. I just want you to call me Dave. Just my name. Joyce," Dave explained. She was surprised by his statement but didn't speak. He continued, "Tonight, we're going to the plaza. The four of us." Joyce was startled. She didn't know how to respond. "It's not possible, Sir Dave," she stammered, unsure of what to say. "It's a good leisure, Joyce. The children need to go to the plaza, right?" Dave said. When it came to reasons, Joyce couldn't win. Felt like she was always silenced. Joyce remained quiet, but after a while, something popped into her mind. She had wanted to ask Dave this for a long time, but she had hesitated. Now she had the courage to say it. "Dave, I know you're a good person. You've shown me so much kindness, and to my children as well. But I really wonder if there's a deeper meaning behind all of this. I want to know if there is, she said, explaining at length. She sighed and sat down. Dave also sat on the swivel chair, staring at her, which made her look away. What do you think, Joyce? He asked in return. I asked you first, Dave. Don't play with me. Whatever you want from me, please don't be too hard. Don't play with me. I don't want to get hurt, and I don't want your kindness to have a reason, Joyce said. Dave's playful demeanor disappeared. I hope you don't take my words the wrong way. I'm just confused, Dave, Joyce continued, wanting Dave to say everything. But based on what she had seen, it seemed like Joyce was annoyed with him. Because of what Joyce said, Dave didn't know what to say next. Joyce approached her children and took them. I think it's wrong to tell you this. I'm sorry, Dave. Thank you for all the kindness you've shown to the twins and me, but I don't see a heavy reason why you're doing this. And until now, I still haven't seen your real face, Joyce said bluntly. Something was indeed fishy. Until now, Dave was still wearing sunglasses and a mask, as if he were crazy every time she saw him. Dave was about to stand up and ask, Are you leaving? That was all that came out of his mouth. The woman replied, Can I take a leave today? My back hurts, she said. Dave nodded, but he sensed that she wasn't telling the truth. He let Joyce go. Dave was left with a feeling of sadness. He couldn't fully comprehend what had happened between them. He thought deeply, remembering what had happened 2 years ago. He couldn't do anything because he had no other choice. 2 years ago, their bodies were close, and no one wanted to leave because of the heat they felt at that time. Joyce only knew Dave's name as John. She didn't know his second name, Dave, so she didn't realize that her ex might be her boss. 2 years ago, their bodies were close and they kissed. Their kisses passed through every part of their bodies. They couldn't remember how long they had been making love. What was important to them was the time they had shared. John, Joyce whispered as she reached her peak after their sweet union. Dave's attention was drawn to his ringing cell phone. He kissed Joyce passionately on the lips before getting up from the bed. He took the phone from the table. I'll answer this first, he told Joyce, who was just looking at him. He wanted to continue their lovemaking, but it was cut short. Joyce just nodded in response. He dressed up before leaving the room. When he was in the living room, he immediately answered the call. Hello, he greeted the person on the other line. Dave, is that you? The person on the other line asked. Why did you call? Is there a problem, Ryan? John or Dave asked his mother. He had just sent money last week. He didn't know where to get more money. He was drowning in debt because he hadn't found a job yet, and his father was often sick. He had no choice but to support them because he was the only one capable of finding a job for the whole family. From the other line, his mother was crying. I need money, son. Your father is very, very sick, she informed him, struggling to speak because of her tears. Dave was stunned. He didn't know where to get the money. He had no one to turn to. If it were Joyce, he would have borrowed money from her. But he hadn't paid her back yet. Seemed like Dave's life was a mess. Mom, I don't have a job yet. I have nowhere to cry, he said. He didn't expect his whole family to end up like this. Dave was truly penniless now. His agency hadn't given him any news about the job abroad he had applied for. It had been a long time, but there was still no news. Okay, son. I'll call again. Take care of yourself, okay? But I hope you can send even a little money to help me treat your father. It's really needed, his mother said. The line went dead, and Dave's tears fell. He was a grown man, but he was still crying. Since he was a child, his father had taught him to be brave in the face of any problem. But now, the problem he was facing was overwhelming. He was confused and exhausted. He was tired of pretending to be brave. A few moments later, he heard Joyce's footsteps approaching him. He composed himself because he didn't want her to know he was struggling. John, she whispered softly. He didn't turn around because he was ashamed to show his weakness. Are you okay? She asked, but the man couldn't hold back anymore. He stood up and approached Joyce, hugging her and sobbing loudly. I'm here. We'll face your problem together, the woman whispered softly, stroking his back. Thank you, Joyce, Dave replied. Please tell me what's wrong. I'll listen. You just need to open up. I'll help if I can, Joyce said. He stood up and hugged Joyce tightly. He cried again. Joyce wouldn't let him suffer. He wasn't wrong to love her. While he was washing the dishes, his phone rang again. Joyce left to get some money from her bank account. Even if it was just a little, it would be a big help for him. Joyce was always there to help him. He owed her so much. She always helped him, no matter what his problem was. He owed her a lot. He promised himself that he wouldn't hurt her because he couldn't bear to see her hurt. Dave was curious because he wasn't expecting any important message. He immediately took his phone from his pocket. Upon reading the message, he dropped the plate he was holding, and it broke. He had received a message from the agency about his job abroad. The message said he had been accepted as a domestic helper in Hong Kong. The salary was high, so he would grab this opportunity. But he was stunned. "I'll accept," he whispered, unable to believe the news. But he just stared at the message. Suddenly, he felt doubt. Was he on the brink of a dilemma? How will I do this? What should I choose? He asked himself. He sat down and placed the phone on the table. He stared at the empty table and thought deeply. Dave's dream was to work abroad, especially since he and his family needed it. They were poor, and his beloved father was seriously ill. But if that were the case, what about Joyce? What would happen to their love? Dave rubbed his face. He was confused. A few moments later, Joyce entered the kitchen with a glass of coffee. She found him restless in his seat. But even if he wanted to lie and say it was nothing, he didn't want to do that. He needed to tell her the truth. "Are you okay?" Joyce greeted him. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world," she said, laughing. "I got 15,000 from my account. I hope it's enough." "I hope it can help," she informed him, placing the glass on the sink. But she was surprised to see the broken plate. "Why is this broken? Did you drop it?" she asked gently. Dave looked at Joyce with sadness in his eyes. He didn't know if he should tell her directly or not. He didn't answer Joyce. All he wanted to do now was cry. It's hard to make a decision, he thought, knowing that he would regret it in the end. But he knew what he needed to choose now. He weighed who needed him more. "Joyce," he said, wanting to get away from Joyce immediately. For the past 2 years, he had promised her that he would never hurt her, no matter what happened. He would never leave her. But now it seemed like he couldn't keep that promise. "Dave, whatever you're going through, I can help you," Joyce said. She was sad for him. She looked into his eyes, which were full of hope. He didn't want to lose or hurt Joyce, but he had no choice but to follow what he thought was right. "I know you'll be hurt by what I'm about to say, Joyce, but I hope you can forgive me," Dave began. Or rather, Joyce knew him as John. He didn't call himself Dave. He stood up and approached Joyce. She faced him, confused. "Just say it. I'm sure I'll understand whatever it is," she said. "If I had a choice, Joyce, I wouldn't do this, but I need to work abroad. I just received a call, and my application as a domestic helper has been approved," he explained. Joyce was stunned by this. Felt like a huge sin had been committed. Joyce was deeply hurt because she already knew what the man was implying. Her lips quivered. "But you said there would be no leaving. You promised me, Dave," she stammered. "You promised me you wouldn't leave me, no matter what happens," she said calmly. But even so, she understood Dave. She didn't know how to answer him. The things that were happening were so painful and heavy. "As a domestic helper, I hope you understand me," he explained, hoping they would end on good terms. "I'm confused about my decision. I can't do this. Feels like I'm being forced to go there. I'm sorry, Joyce. I hope you understand me. I don't want you to suffer either. I'll accept it if you're angry with me. Please always remember that I love you," he said. Joyce couldn't speak. She held his hand. "Joyce, I promise you everything will be okay. I really need the money. I'm drowning in debt. I'll come back," he said. "I understand you, Dave. I love you too. But I'm scared. I'm scared that when you get there, you won't think of me anymore. You won't love me anymore. You won't recognize me when you come back. So, I hope you understand what I'm feeling," Joyce said, tears flowing. "Joyce, please," Dave said. but Joyce walked away from him. "Let me explain," he shouted. But Joyce quickly disappeared from his sight. Dave thought that was enough for him to proceed with working abroad. He did it not because he didn't truly love Joyce, but because it was what needed to be done now for the good of many. He sat down and cried. His mind was confused. "I'm sorry, Joyce," he whispered. At present, Dave didn't stop showing his strength to Joyce because now that he was more capable, he should show her that he still loved her. But fate was indeed cruel. He didn't know if he should just tell Joyce that he was Dave, her ex-boyfriend, or if he should remove his sunglasses and mask so she could fully recognize him. He wasn't obvious with the name he was using now because he had used John before. But Dave thought that if he told her, nothing good would happen. Joyce might take the twins away because he wasn't sure if she would forgive him. He was now a chairman and a powerful person. He had worked hard to achieve what he had now. But in this situation, he needed to be careful with the decisions he made because his children and his reunion with Joyce depended on it. Dave was afraid, so he prayed, "Lord, please give me your guidance." While his phone was on the desk, he just stared at his children, whom he had been with for a long time in the office, but he still couldn't call them his children. "When will I be able to call you my children?" he whispered, hoping to say it out loud without hesitation. A moment later, Eileen approached him, holding a Barbie doll. "Papa," she said. Dave was startled and stared at her. "Papa, is that what I heard? Did you call me Papa?" he asked again. Dave was in disbelief. "Papa," Eileen said again. Dave was overjoyed. He wanted the child to say it again, but it felt like something was bothering him. Eliza also approached them. "What did Eileen say?" she asked, and the other child said the same thing. Dave's heart pounded with joy. "Papa," he thought to himself, feeling so happy. "It feels so good to be called Papa by you," he said to them. But he stopped his celebration when someone knocked. He quickly moved the two children away from him, but not too far. He adjusted his seat on his swivel chair. "Please come in," he said. The door opened, and the beautiful Joyce appeared before him. No matter what, his attraction to her would never disappear. "It's you," he greeted her, adjusting himself and smiling at Joyce. "I'd like to say goodbye. I'll take my children now," she said. Dave nodded. "Thank you again for watching them." "I'm sorry too," she said, not looking at him, as if she didn't want to see him. "It's nothing, Joyce," he said in a manly voice. Dave let Joyce take the children, but just as she was about to leave, she turned to him again. "Sir, if I may ask, why don't you remove your sunglasses and mask? Do you have a problem? Are you sick? Are you sensitive?" Joyce asked curiously. Dave didn't answer for a few seconds because he was thinking of an excuse. "Yes, I'm sorry. I'm sickly. I know there's no pandemic anymore, but I need this and it's also the doctor's advice," he said, making an excuse, and Joyce just nodded, seemingly unconvinced. As Joyce was about to leave, Dave was still staring at her. She was truly beautiful. Even though she dressed simply, her beauty was radiant. After fixing her children, she turned to him again. "I'd like to take a leave again tomorrow, Sir Dave. I'll take my children out for a walk. It's been a long time since I last took them out," she said. Even if it wasn't allowed, for Joyce everything was allowed. Dave nodded and said, "I'll join you," hoping she would agree. Fortunately, Joyce agreed. Dave was surprised but happy. Joyce was about to leave when Dave suddenly remembered the beautiful dress he had bought for her. He quickly called her. "Joyce, wait," he said, and Joyce, confused, turned to him. "I have a present for you," he said, placing the plastic bag containing the dress on the desk. "It's a dress," he said. Joyce's eyes widened, and she couldn't speak immediately. Dave stood up and approached her. "I know it's sudden, but I hope you'll accept it. I just want to give you a dress," he said, making an excuse. Even though the truth was he wanted to show his love for Joyce. In any case, he wanted to make an effort for what he felt for her. This dress was really intended for her. "I don't know what to say, but okay. Thank you, Sir Dave," Joyce said, smiling. Dave handed her the bag, smiled at her, and looked away because he felt awkward. Joyce seemed to melt at the man's smile, especially in the past few weeks. He had been showing her something different, and to her children as well. Meanwhile, their outing continued. They went to an amusement park. Dave planned to tell Joyce what he had thought of last night. In his mind, he hoped Joyce wouldn't get angry with him. They enjoyed themselves first, riding various rides suitable for children. They played, and during the game, Dave even won 2 teddy bears for the twins. Fortunately, he repeated his previous win. Otherwise, one of the twins would have cried if he hadn't given them 2. The children were very happy and jumping around. Joyce was also happy to see her children happy, especially now that Dave was with them. It seemed like her children behaved differently when Dave was around. They felt like he was their father, but Joyce also felt fear because she thought her children might get used to it. She couldn't hold back anymore, so she asked Dave, "Sir, what are you really doing? I've asked you before, but you didn't answer me directly. Why are you so kind to us? Not just to me, your employee, but also to my children. You always give them gifts, food, and other things. And last time you gave me food, but your actions are also very kind to the 3 of us. I'm not blind not to notice that. Sometimes I just pretend not to see it. But now, I can't hide it anymore," she admitted to the man, but she was surprised by her own boldness while they were sitting near the carousel. It was already evening, so the lights at the amusement park were beautiful. During the concert, the children left and they quickly walked away. Dave was left there, stunned. He had ruined their outing. He wished he hadn't brought it up when the mother and children were bonding. He didn't know if Joyce was angry with him or what, but he wished he had said it in a better way or not at all when her children were with her and they were having fun. He felt like he had ruined their day. The twins were puzzled when their mother suddenly pulled them away while they were walking. They innocently waved and said goodbye to Dave. 2 days had passed since Dave confessed to Joyce that he liked her. He thought that if he had told her his feelings earlier, without her knowing who he was, she might have accepted him, and he would have had no choice but to reveal that he was John Dave, her ex-boyfriend. In the days that followed, Joyce avoided him, even when their eyes met. She quickly took her children when she brought them to Dave's office. She didn't stay long in the office. She didn't know if she was shy or angry. Who wouldn't be surprised by what he had done? On the other hand, whether Joyce admitted it or not, she was starting to feel something for Dave. Who wouldn't fall for Dave? He was so kind, a gentleman, and, above all, treated her children well. His wealth and success were just bonuses. But she wasn't sure if he was handsome because she still hadn't seen his full face. Something was still bothering her, as if she was being played with, or maybe Dave had another reason. But Joyce couldn't avoid the surge in her heart. She took note of the order when Dave called her. Her colleague covered for her. "Thank you," she said to Alia, who then took the order of a family. Joyce quickly left the counter. She met a waitress who said, "You know, it seems like Sir Dave has a thing for you." She didn't know if she should be happy or worried about what the waitress said. She just forced a smile and went straight to Dave's office. After making sure she was clean, she was called by Dave. "You called for me, sir," she said to Dave, who was playing with her children. Joyce was happy that Dave was making her children happy, but she wasn't sure if it was right. Dave greeted her with a smile on his lips. "Can we go to the movies?" he asked while walking inside. "I still have work, sir," Joyce defended herself. The truth was, she was just shy and avoiding Dave. "Just this once, Joyce. Besides, I've already told your children that we're going, and they're very excited," Dave said. Joyce had no choice but to agree. They went to the movies. They were in the cinema. Dave planned to confess to Joyce again here. He would keep pestering her until he got her sweet yes. And then he would reveal that John and he were the same person. His real name was John Dave. There, he would also remove his mask and glasses. "You can do this, Dave," he encouraged himself. It was just the 2 of them, and her 2 children were on Joyce's right side. Joyce was busy watching the movie, while Dave was busy staring at her gentle face. After a while, Joyce turned to him. "I know you're staring at me, so just say what you want to say," she said. Dave sighed before answering. "I have something to tell you, but please don't walk out again like you did at the amusement park. I know it's fast, but please listen to me first," he said. "Say it directly." Joyce said, and Dave laughed softly. I've already told you that I like you. Now, I want to tell you that I really want to court you, Joyce, he said. His heart was pounding. Whatever Joyce's answer would be, he would accept it. I'll think about it, Joyce replied. Dave was speechless. That answer was like saying no. But okay, prove to me that everything you say is true, that you really like me, Joyce said again, giving him joy. He couldn't believe it. He kissed Joyce's hand, which surprised her. Both of them were stunned by the unexpected event. Joyce felt something strange. It was as if she had felt the warmth of his lips before. Dave, Joyce whispered softly as their bodies moved away. The children whispered as if they were sharing energy again. I really like you, Joyce, Dave said again. Joyce just stared at him for a long time. What did you really see in me that made you like me? She asked. If only he could tell the truth without hesitation, he would. But he couldn't. He wanted to make sure he had her heart back first, and at the right time he would confess. I think we should go home, Joyce said, and Dave just nodded. Dave felt something different. It was as if he wanted to claim her lips again, but not in this kind of place and not at this time. He bit his lip, restraining himself from the heat he was feeling. They decided to go home, each holding one of the twins so they wouldn't get separated. From a distance, they looked like a perfect family. That's what Dave was thinking, hoping it would stay that way. He really wanted them to be a family. The days passed quickly, and Joyce and Dave became closer. There wasn't a day when Dave didn't visit Joyce in the dining area of the restaurant. Even when they were busy, Dave got closer to the twins. There wasn't a day when he didn't show his love for them. There wasn't a day when he didn't surprise them or give them something. He spoiled them. One day, Dave surprised her. Dave, you've been staring at me for an hour, she said when he hugged her from behind. Yes, I've been watching you for an hour, he joked, slapping his shoulder as she turned to him. You're really annoying. Can you leave for a while? I can't concentrate on my work, she said. He just nodded. Joyce didn't expect Dave to be like this. Whenever Dave did this to her, she remembered her ex-boyfriend, who shared the same name as Dave. She only realized this one night while she was reflecting, and it occurred to her that John was what she called him, so that was the only thing that stuck in her mind, his first name. But she realized that John Dave was the name of her ex. She wondered where her ex-boyfriend was now. Dave kissed her, but she was annoyed. He still hadn't removed his mask. She often teased him to remove it, but Dave still refused. We'll go out later with our children, he informed her. Joyce was surprised when he called Alea and Eileen our children. Yes, eventually they will be our children, he said. If you say yes to me, he added. Joyce was very happy. She was also very grateful because she felt that this was the one, since they were a package with her children, and Dave fully accepted them. She didn't expect her life to end up like this. She hoped it would stay this way, but for Joyce, something was still bothering her. For the past few weeks, she really wanted to do something she had been wanting to do. See Dave's full face because she had a hunch. One night, while they were at her house, Dave kissed her hand. You're really annoying, Joyce said. Dave pouted. Kiss me, he suddenly said. Joyce rolled her eyes but came up with a plan. Okay, I'll kiss you, but can you remove your mask first? She asked. Dave almost forgot that he was covering his face. He had gotten used to wearing the mask, and it often worked because he used the excuse of his doctor's advice. There were times when Dave was so happy because it seemed like Joyce was coming back into his life, but he was afraid. He was afraid that they couldn't stay like this. He felt that the right time was near for him to tell Joyce everything, but he didn't expect to be exposed earlier than planned. Take it off. I'm tired of your excuses. Isn't it weird? I'm really getting weirded out. You're courting me, saying you like me, but I still haven't seen your full face. What's going on, Dave? Can you just remove your mask and your glasses? Joyce said. Dave just looked down, but fortunately, they were at her house, and he knew what to do. Just as he was about to remove his mask and glasses, the lights went out, and it became dark. Joyce couldn't see Dave's face even though he had removed his mask and glasses. I love you, Joyce, Dave suddenly said and approached Joyce, kissing her on the lips. Dave's body felt warm, and so did Joyce's. What she wanted Dave to do earlier was forgotten. A strange warmth enveloped her entire body. It was the first time she had felt this again after what had happened with her ex-boyfriend. "I think we need to go to the room," Joyce said in a soft voice. She looked at the twins and made sure they were in good condition. They quickly entered the room. Once inside, Dave didn't hesitate to undress. He kissed Joyce again until they reached the peak of their bodies. But as Joyce was undressing Dave and her eyes were very close to his body, she saw a butterfly tattoo on his chest. She froze. Joyce felt anger and sadness. She stopped kissing Dave and quickly turned on the light, revealing Dave's face. His face had changed slightly, becoming more manly and clean. But it was indeed John Dave, her ex-boyfriend. "John, you lied to me," she said angrily. Dave's brow furrowed, but when he saw Joyce's reaction, he just sighed. His plan was ruined. "Let me explain, Joyce," he said in a calm voice, but Joyce quickly dressed and left the room. She couldn't accept what Dave had done to her. "It's not possible, Joyce," he called from behind her. But she didn't look back as she quickly walked out of the room. Her tears flowed as she remembered how John had left her before. It was so painful, and now he had tricked her again in a different way. She was so stupid not to realize that Dave and her ex were the same person. "I'm leaving, Dave. I don't want to see your face again," she shouted angrily. "I can't believe that after all this time, you've just been tricking me. You even made excuses that you were wearing a mask and hiding your face because it was the doctor's advice, but you were hiding something all this time," Joyce said. "Joyce?" Dave called her name and approached her, but she moved away. "Please, Dave, leave. Get out of my sight," she said. She didn't want to see his face yet. So Joyce left Dave's house. Dave couldn't do anything. Here it comes, he thought. Was this what he had been afraid of? He had been exposed earlier than planned. While he was in the living room drinking alcohol, he whispered, "I'm sorry, Joyce." He typed on his phone, "I'm so sorry, Joyce. I didn't mean it to happen. I thought that if I introduced myself immediately, you would be angry with me, and I wanted to win you back before I revealed myself to you. But believe me, I would have told you eventually. Yes, I made a mistake before and left you, but you know I had a reason. I hope you can forgive me. I love you, Joyce. I can't lose you. I don't know how to tell you everything. I'm confused. I hurt you before, and I'm asking for forgiveness now. I hope you understand me. I was afraid that if I introduced myself immediately, you would distance yourself, and I would lose my chance with our children. I hope you can forgive me, Joyce. Please don't distance yourself from me. Don't take our children away from me. I'm begging you." That was the long message he sent to Joyce. Dave just stared at the ceiling. He had hurt Joyce again. From the beginning, he knew it was wrong and shouldn't have done it. But as they got closer again, his courage to lie and hide himself grew stronger. "I've hurt her again," he said. Dave felt that it couldn't be fixed anymore. A week had passed. During those days, Joyce didn't go to work. She stayed at home, realizing that she had made a mistake in pushing Dave away. She hadn't let him explain properly. She read his text message repeatedly and felt that he was truly sorry. In the past few weeks, Dave had shown his sincerity. She thought that she had already forgiven Dave a long time ago. The pain had just returned, but time heals all wounds, as they say. All the anger faded away, but what added to her anger was Dave's failure to immediately admit that he was her ex. She couldn't accept why he had pretended to be someone else. Her 2 children were in the living room. She let them play while she sulked in the room. She had also been lonely for a week because Dave hadn't visited, perhaps giving her space. But in her heart, she knew she really loved him. That had always been the truth, and it had never disappeared. She got up from the bed, took her phone, and texted Dave. "Please come here," she said. After sending the text, she covered herself with the blanket again. She thought deeply. It was right. Dave had proven that he truly loved her. After all these years, it was still her. She felt it in every way Dave could show his love for her. Physically, by giving her attention and quality time, by taking care of their children, by giving gifts, and more. She also thought that perhaps Dave had done the right thing by pretending and not admitting immediately. If she had known right away that John and Dave, her boss, were the same person, she might not have given him a chance. Maybe he did the right thing. Dave did that because he wanted to prove himself first. He didn't apologize immediately. He didn't use flowery words right away but showed his love through actions. Why didn't I think of that immediately? Joyce said to herself in frustration. She got up again and texted Dave, then placed the phone back on the table. She stared at the ceiling and smiled like a fool. A few hours later, someone knocked on her door. It was Dave. "Dave," she said. Before Dave could enter, she gave him a passionate kiss. Dave fought back. Neither of them wanted to lose in their kiss. "I'm so sorry, Joyce," Dave said as their lips parted. "I thought you wouldn't come back. I hope you can forgive me," he said. "I've thought about it and I know the reason. Let's not think about those things anymore. What's important now is that we can start a new chapter in our lives, in our love, and this time with the twins," he said. Joyce smiled. Fortunately, as the twins ran towards them, their kissing stopped. "Tito, Dave, Mommy?" the twins asked in confusion. Right there, Dave and Joyce admitted that Dave was indeed the father of the twins. The twins were very happy and almost cried as they hugged their father. Dave was also very happy. "I knew it. I felt like you were our daddy," one of the twins said, while the other clapped. "All these years, I never forgot you, and I love you so much. I love you and our children so much," Dave said gently, full of love. After they bonded and put the twins to sleep in their room, Dave unexpectedly carried Joyce to their room. "We'll make another twin," he whispered in her ear. "Dave, what are you doing?" Joyce said. Before they could enjoy each other, Dave stopped what he was doing and took something from his pocket. He took out a small velvet box and showed her a diamond ring. It was an engagement ring. "I always carry this, Joyce, in case one day I could do this. Please marry me, Joyce. I've waited so long for this," he said. Joyce cried. "Yes, I will marry you, Dave," she said, and they kissed again, enjoying each other's lips and bodies. They were so eager for each other that they didn't stop and remained kissing while Dave continued to please Joyce. Joyce thought she was lucky to have Dave because despite the trials he had faced before, he had still succeeded in life. Even though she knew he was broken-hearted and sad about leaving her, from being a domestic helper to a successful businessman, this was the man she loved and gave another chance to. After they officially became a couple again, they had a 3-month preparation for their intimate wedding. And finally, in the church, all the trials they had experienced continued. In the church, their love continued. After they got married, they lived happily and peacefully. And here ends the love story of Joyce and Dave. Thank you very much to everyone.